Now, the only way that you can have low yin energy, and these are categorized like female, male, hot, cold, in, out. You know, these are all different ways to categorize yin and yang. So if you have a female and she has a certain amount of estrogen in her body, you know, throughout her life, she has a certain amount of estrogen. And at a certain point, when you go through menopause, you have less estrogen. But it's not just estrogen, you know, but it is, that's the easiest way to explain it, I believe. So as you go through menopause, you start having less estrogen, which is less yin. If you're going to have less yin, if it's going down, then your yang goes up.
Yeah.
Yin is cold. Yang is heat. And that's why people exhibit heat signs when they become yin deficient, because the yang is just taking over. And it's because of the interdependence that works that way. Okay, the other thing I wanted to talk about, which is just really helps explain diabetes. There's also a way of diagnosing different diseases that's called the 5-element theory. And there are 5 elements or 5 phases. There's wood, which makes fire. There's fire, which makes earth. There's earth that makes metal, and metal makes water. And then it starts again. Water makes wood. Okay, so this is the 5-element theory. So this goes in a cycle. If you could imagine a cycle that starts with water, then wood, then fire, then earth, then metal, and back around again. And we say that one generates the next one. Okay. And if things are in balance, all of your elements will be in balance. And they'll be working together. If they're not, if one is more pronounced than the other, then you're going to have some issues. So with something like diabetes is basically centered in this area, which is the earth area.
We can't see what you're pointing to. Could you describe it like midsection of the abdomen or third chakra? Can you help us out with that? We can't see we can't see what you're pointing to.
Okay.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. So if you have a okay. So if you, yes, I'm pointing to your stomach and your spleen. Basically this area up here. Okay. And these organs relate to earth energy. Anything that deals with digestion, that deals with food, that is the earth. And you know, it makes a lot of sense. You can have that understanding because our food comes from the earth, and then we digest it in this area. So this is the stomach and the spleen. And the stomach and the spleen are responsible for digestion. Okay. So another element, I don't want to go through all of them because it gets a little complicated. It really takes a lot more time than we have just to explain it. But another element that I think is very important to have an understanding about is the wood element. And see, if you look at the cycle, the wood generates fire, the fire generates earth. Okay. So right now, we're in the season of wood.
Mm-hmm.
The wood is the trees coming out of the earth. The wood, the energy of the wood is really like a bursting forth or sticking straight up, like the trees stick up out the earth, right? And jutting forth. That's the energy of spring. It's all about blooming and things coming up and new ideas. You might be getting things being born or renewed or regenerated. That's what the wood energy is about. And it's interesting to me because our seasons have become so, like, there used to be a precise time. You could tell by the weather that it was spring. You could tell by the weather that it was fall or winter, something like that. But now I think we had really warm weather in January, and we had a number of warm days in February and March. And now it's getting a little colder. But it makes you think, okay, so what is happening in terms of the seasonal influences in terms of this five element theory that we're dealing with? I've thought about it a lot in recent days because our with the COVID-19 has an effect on the lung, and the lung and the large intestine. Their particular season is the fall, and it just makes me think that perhaps we really got this virus sometime in the fall.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Talking about. I really think it came in the fall,
Mhm.
and it's staying here. So hopefully, with all this detoxification that's taking place right now, and that's right on line, right in line with what's happening in terms of the natural world. This is the time of detoxification. This is a time when the liver needs to be cleaned out, and the other is the gallbladder. So it's an excellent time to do that. And that's what the earth is doing. If anybody has gone for a walk recently, I mean, the air just smells so much better, just feels so much clearer at this point. So it's really a good time to try to get some fresh air. Now when you go outside, you can really get some fresh air. But that's the earth. The earth element is more like late summer. So I'm not sure of the correlation now because things are just so kind of turned around in terms of our season.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions so far about anything I've said so far?
I'm curious from the point of view of working with the spleen and the stomach and the issue of digestion and synthesis of what the food breaks down into, and also in terms of the elements, what in your experience, where would you approach an acupuncture session with somebody who has, you were either diagnosed them with diabetes or they're coming to you with a diagnosis of diabetes? Would you work directly on the spleen? Would you work with triple burner? What would be your approach to beginning to rebalance the system?
Okay, yeah, I was definitely going to get to that.
Curious.
Remember, I had mentioned they're called correspondences in terms of the five elements. So there's certain characteristics, there's certain things that go along with each element. I just want to say this first, and then I'll get to what you're talking about. So the season for Earth is late summer. Now this is from the Neijing, or the oldest medical text from China. It comes up a little bit. The mysterious forces of the earth create moisture in the heaven and fertile soil upon the earth. They create the flesh within the body and the stomach and spleen, pancreas. They create the yellow color and give the voice the ability to sing. They create the mouth and sense of taste, the sweet flavor, and the emotion of anxiety and worry. And I just wanted to mention that or talk about a little bit because these are what's called the correspondences for Earth.
Mm.
And these all relate to issues that you see in diabetes.
Mm.
Because diabetes is known as a disease of dampness.
Mm.
It's also known as a disease of sweetness. And a lot of times what goes along with certain types of diabetes is a lot of flesh. And of course it is the stomach and spleen organs that are affected more. But there are other organs that are also affected. They create the yellow color, give the voice the ability to sing, create the mouth and sense of taste, the sweet flavor, and the emotions of anxiety and worry. So you take your typical, I'm gonna say typical person who has diabetes, okay? Most of us, and I wanted to give an example just to, kind of clarify things for people, just to give you a picture, really. And I think most of us could identify with this particular person. So, and if you think about the correspondences of Earth, this is that person. So you take a female, although it could be a male too, who has a job that is stressful, who's living in a home with children, possibly married, having marital difficulties, or if they're single, having difficulties with their partner, caring for children, not having enough time to exercise, not having enough time to fix proper food and deal with proper nutrition, in a state of worry due to, maybe they're not bringing in enough income, maybe because of their relationships, and because of all the other lifestyle things that, I just mentioned. But all of these kind of correlate with what happens with someone who's diabetic. And it doesn't have to. And that's why I mentioned there are 9 different syndromes in terms of Chinese medicine that we deal with, because some affect the liver. If a person is in a state of anger, so you have someone who's just kind of worried, but then you have people who maybe they're not worried, they're just in a state of anger all the time. So the anger causes what we call liver stagnation, or a liver that where the qi, the energy of the liver is not moving. And if the energy of the liver is not moving, then it's kind of stuck, what we call stagnation. And that causes really depression. And I'm not certain if people have questions about that or have an understanding about that. But in terms of energetic medicine, which acupuncture really is, when you are depressed, it's usually the heart and the liver that's affected. Okay. The liver is affected because it deals with emotions, and more specifically, the emotions of anger and frustration. Now, if that anger gets stuck, it's okay to be angry. You can go outside and be driving, somebody cuts you off or whatever, you're going to be angry, But the thing is, not to sit in that anger and stay in that anger, because if you do that, that does not allow for the smooth flow of liver qi. And when you have the smooth flow of that qi in the liver, when it's moving the way it's supposed to, that's when you have peace of mind. And that's when you have a greater sense of well-being. So most people here in the United States are stressed and they're angry. And I think I know that's one of the reasons why there's a tremendous amount of diabetes. In fact, from the CDC, there are 34 million people in the United States that have diabetes. That's like almost 11% of the population. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So now, in terms of your question, there are, I didn't know which one I wanted to deal with first. I think I'll go to Western medicine first. Okay. So in terms of Western medicine, diabetes is seen as a chronic condition that affects the way the body can process sugar. Okay. And this means the body does not fully respond to insulin because it can't work properly. The blood glucose levels keep rising. That results in something that's called hyperglycemia. Diabetes is most commonly diagnosed in older adults, but increasingly more children have diabetes. In fact, I've had a couple of clients who were like teens who had diabetes. One who had diabetes 1, and one with type 2 diabetes. So we're seeing it more and more. Well, in terms of Eastern medicine, well, in terms of Western medicine too, it's basically seen as a disease of lifestyle. So if you can, eat more vegetables, eat more grains, eat more things that are healthier for your body, and also exercise, and also have correct thought, and also do your meditation, get in touch with your spirit, all those types of things, it does have an effect on that. In terms of Eastern medicine, this is seen a little differently because with acupuncture, we have something called a differential diagnosis. So if I have two people, I have one person, 25 years old, maybe 115 pounds, in a pretty good state of health, just diagnosed with diabetes, however. And then we have someone else who's a gentleman who's 6'5", 275 pounds, and he's just been diagnosed with diabetes. We're going to treat them entirely different. But there are other factors that come into play. We're not just going to, prescribe metformin and that's it. Because one person has one pattern of disease, that's what we call it, and another has another pattern of disease. So you have to have, what's called basically a differential diagnosis. So the person who's 25 years of age, if, she comes in and she says she was just diagnosed, maybe pre-diabetic, I would tell her, well, you have to deal with the worry, the anxiety, because initially when a person comes into the office, the first thing I ask them is how are you doing? How are things going? How's your relationship? How's your job? How are your children? Do you like what you do? Do you have a job? And from all of these questions, I'm able to ascertain what's going on, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. So, and especially if someone is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. We also ask, what is their appetite like? How's your diet? So I think it's very good to deal with it that way because as a person comes in, and I've clients who I've seen for years, on a regular basis. So if I notice something different when I start my questioning, then I'm able to, take note of that. So it can be preventative if you are, coming in for holistic treatments on a regular basis. So if she had that issue, I would just recommend to her maybe certain types of exercises. I recommend to people, so much to meditate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's important to meditate. And especially if people are stressed out, I recommend a meditation. Then I would recommend certain foods, specifically for the earth energy. You need foods, you need root foods like pumpkin, squash, all the different, orange vegetables. And of course, the fresh leafy green vegetables. I recommend things like that. And I'd also tell them to increase their water intake. There's certain teas you can take.
Yeah.
So those are things that I would recommend. Um, and with the gentleman who also has, diabetes, I would recommend something a little different. And I would also treat them with the acupuncture differently. So I wouldn't give her as many needles. I wouldn't, I might just deal with a couple of needles to help in terms of the diabetes. So I would basically do acupuncture points on the stomach and the spleen. There are a few in the back that are specifically for acupuncture. Acupuncture is very good in terms of dealing with neuropathy, which is something
Mm-hmm.
people with diabetes